Well, what is up, Eastern Hills? We are live, and we are so glad that you've joined us. My name is Anthony. I'm the finance and HR guy here at Eastern Hills.
And my name is Kelsey. I'm the associate teaching pastor and student pastor, and we're super excited for you to join us. In fact, because we are live, we can interact with you. So we have a question to start the day. Our first question of the day is, what is your favorite summertime treat? Go ahead and jot those answers down in your chat. We'll share them. Anthony, what's yours?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with ice cream, and I'm going to go a little bit different from last night. So there's this thing at a Maverick kind of gas station called a For Real. Oh, man, it's like a milkshake thing. I'll tell you what, the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, For Real, that is my favorite summertime treat today. And I think I actually might go get one maybe in between services here today.
Are you saying for real?
No, it's like F-R-E-E-L, I think.
Oh, for real. All right, I'm going to go with that.
Yeah. What about
That's
you?
fair.
Favorite summertime treat?
I have to go with the traditional watermelon. Like, give me a half a watermelon and I'm a happy gal. Like, not afterwards. Afterwards, I'm not so happy. But during, I am super stoked about my watermelon. It's delicious.
Awesome. That's awesome. So Tyler on YouTube is saying that his favorite summertime treat is a cold watermelon on a hot summer day. So you've got a cohort there. Granny Annie says her favorite is an iced coffee from McDonald's. Nice. That'll work. Doug is saying a strawberry shake. That sounds good.
Lisa is saying homemade ice cream. This is your wife. Do you guys make homemade ice cream?
Sometimes. But
That's
I'll tell you what, my
impressive.
mom makes some, and we may actually have some today. Love it. So yeah, drop it in the comments, and we would love to interact with you on YouTube, Facebook, on ehills.org, and drop those in there. We'll interact throughout our morning here. So in addition to that, we would love for you to share the stream, so to let your family and friends and connections know all about this. So whatever platform you're joining us on, share that and let them know about it, and maybe they will watch together with you on whatever platform you're watching. So can't wait for you to do that as well. Anybody else jumping in there?
I have a ton of ice cream answers. Sherry said loves ice cream. Linda says Dairy Queen. She's on the Dairy Queen bandwagon, so that feels good. I have watermelon iced tea.
Oh.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Michaela, I'm going to need you to share that with me, okay? Just send me a recipe. Let me know what that is. That
That's
sounds
good.
amazing.
JD saying a strawberry and banana mix. I'm assuming that's maybe a shake or something, but either way, I don't think you can go wrong with that mixture there. Dustin's saying an Arnold Palmer. So, yeah, we got some good things. So keep them coming. Let us know what your favorite summertime treat is for sure. So, like I mentioned at the top, we are in the middle of our series, or actually finishing up our series called On Demand, where we're kind of studying the life of David. And last week, in week 3, we talked about how the right thing at the wrong time is still the wrong thing. And so just looking through the life of David and what that looks like. So that was last week. Kelsey, what are we talking about this week?
This week it's taken a little bit of a turn. Before this, David hasn't been king, and now David is king. And so we see what happens when we get what we want, when we get to where we finally think we need to be, and then we stop making progress moving forward, stop growing. We make some big mistakes. And the interesting thing about this story is there are people in his path that could have made a difference. And so we're going to see what difference we can make in our own lives and in the lives of the people around us. With that, we believe that you as parents are the heroes of your kids' story, and there are some things that we are going to talk about today that are a little difficult for some young ones. So if you have young ones in the room and you want to listen to the message first and open up dialogue with your kids after, go for it. We want you to just be prepared for some content that maybe you weren't ready for the conversation, but it is a good conversation to have with your kids when you are ready.
Absolutely. So in addition to that, we're going to be taking communion together at the end of our time together. So you can use this time before we get started here to go grab crackers and juice or chips and soda or bread or whatever it is. Doesn't have to be fancy, but we're going to take that together at the end of our time together. So be sure to grab that now, and we can get ready to go. So what do we got going on? Favorite summertime treat? I've got boiled peanuts. I've never heard of such a thing.
I've had them once.
Okay.
I don't remember them.
Yeah.
But I have had them.
All right.
I got s'mores from Corey.
Yeah.
Corey loves s'mores. Watermelon with a dash of salt. I've heard it makes it sweeter. I haven't tried it yet. So, Mackenzie, I'll get on that as well.
Makes it sweeter. Ice cream. We got another ice cream in here.
Lots of that. Lots of peaches.
Oh.
Lots
Palisade
of peaches.
peaches. You ever had a Palisade peach?
Yes. Thank you, Colorado.
Yes.
For such amazing things.
Amazing. So continue to drop that in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. So if you're joining us for the first couple of times, maybe your first time, couple, 3 times, special welcome to you. We would love to get connected with you. And so, Kelsey, how do we go about that?
It's pretty easy. I promise we're not going to ask terribly difficult or intrusive questions. You can go to ehills.org/connect, and it's a way for us to get to know a little bit about you and to reach out and say, hey, we want to do community and life with you. So if you're new, if you're checking things out, want more information, ehills.org/connect is a great way for us to make that initial connect with you.
Absolutely. Love it. Love it. So keep dropping in the chat. Let us know what's going on. Carl is here. The Powells are here. Welcome to you guys. Living Gymnast is here. Loves ice cream. Love it. Love it. What else? Anything over there on Facebook?
I saw peach cobbler, which now I want peach cobbler.
What's the difference between peach cobbler and peach pie?
I think cobblers don't have a crust, just a topping. I could be wrong. If somebody knows the actual answer, would love to hear that from you.
I'm not a scientist, so I'm not quite sure. So, hey, a lot of the things that we're doing around here, I've got to look different just because of quarantine. We're sitting in front of an empty auditorium with some amazing volunteers getting us all online here. But everything is different, but it's all continued to be made possible because of your generosity. And so if you choose to invest here at Eastern Hills to help everyone experience that Jesus makes life better, thanks so much for being part of that team. We could not do that without you. And thanks so much for continuing to be faithful in that during this time. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Any other things there in the chat about their favorite summertime treat?
Not so far. What about for you?
Yeah, I don't have anything new either. So keep them coming. We would love to hear all about that for sure.
Yeah, man, I just have peach cobbler in my mind now, so I'm really like stuck on the peach cobbler. But we're going to get started in just a few minutes here. But we have a question that Phil is going to ask up front that you can answer starting right now. The question is, what is a project or a hobby you gave up on and why? What is a project or a hobby you gave up on and why? And I can just tell you, it was knitting. I tried the whole knitting thing in high school, made some friends some scarves, but all of them had this ripple effect. It was not a good thing, so I gave up quickly for my own embarrassment.
You weren't going for the ripple effect, I take it. No, that's fine. It's fine. So for me, I think it was collecting baseball cards and other sports memorabilia. Like, that was so fun growing up, but just kind of ran out of time, I suppose, and it just got to be so flooded with tons of different stuff that I stopped collecting, but still have the collection. It's fun to go back to. So drop that in the chat. Phil is going to be asking that right at the outset, and we would love for him to share some of your ideas in there as well. So we are about ready to get started. We're going to start in about 1 minute. So take that time to maybe go fill up your coffee, go grab those communion supplies, and get ready to go. But we are ready to get started in 1 minute, and that 1 minute starts now.
What's up, Eastern Hills? It's good to see you. Come on, as one church, let's worship with everything that we have, every voice. Let's sing praises to our King for how good he is. So come on, let's sing. It wasn't for nothing that you shed your blood. So I'm gonna live like my shame is gone. I won't be shackled to the way I was. Oh, I'm gonna live like my chains are gone. Gone. Now my sin is dead and gone, and I'll sing hallelujah. Done. He is risen in his dead, and I'll sing hallelujah. Praise is a weapon that will overcome. Oh, I'm risen, it is done. And I sing hallelujah. Gone, now my sin is dead and gone. And I sing hallelujah. Gone, he is risen, it is dead. And I sing hallelujah.
Good morning, everybody. We keep doing that just to make sure you know we're live. Good to see you. So glad you're joining us this morning as we continue our series On Demand and actually finish our series this weekend called On Demand, where we are talking about the development that God does in us that isn't the fast kind, that isn't quick, in a moment that we're used to everything getting to us really fast and being impatient when it doesn't. How do we learn that? And how do we do that through the life of David? And actually this week, we're going to talk about, as we finish this series, what does it look like when we take our foot off the gas? What does it look like when we start to go back to settling for this on-demand development? I want to let you know a couple things as well. Next week, we are going to do a special talk. We're going to talk a little bit about race today and some of the implications even from David's life in this situation that I think have a lot to do with what we're going through. And we're going to talk about a number of more controversial topics next week that are things that Jesus was really passionate about, but oftentimes we edit Jesus to fit within our political viewpoint because we view our faith through the lens of our politics too often rather than the other way around. And I would just continue to ask you for grace. There will be things I say incorrectly. There will be things that you hear me say one way and I meant another way. And so I hope that you hear me. We believe every single person is created in the image of God with infinite dignity, value, and worth. And we want to communicate Jesus' heart for that over the next couple weeks, especially as we continue to navigate this as a world. I also want to let you know in just a few weeks, we are going to begin regathering physically for services in this room. So for the last several months, we have been all digital, and you guys have been amazing. You've continued to stay connected. You've continued to be in groups. You've continued to tune in, even actually engaging more and more online, which is awesome. And you've continued to financially support all the work that we're doing in our community. I can't thank you enough for that. And we know that over the next few weeks, few months, it's going to be a return to something this fall, and it's going to take progress. It's going to take steps to get there. And so look for more information about how to reserve your spot for June 27th and 28th in the coming weeks. If you want to join us physically, maybe you're going to continue with community groups or in your home watching online. That's great as well. And then today, actually, we are going to take communion at the end of our time together before we go back into worship. And so if you don't have it yet, I just encourage you, grab whatever you have around, something to drink, something to eat. Obviously, we love being able to do that all together, but it's a unique opportunity for us to still be able to do it even from our homes today. Before we get started, I'm going to pray for us. And if you've never heard me speak before, I pray kneeling. And the reason that I do that, especially in a time like this, is because modeling humility is to follow Jesus. And so we want to humble ourselves before him and ask him to speak to us in this time in a unique way. Would you pray with me? God, thank you. Thank you that no matter where we've been or what we've done, you love us. No matter what experiences we've had, we still have more to learn. And I pray that you would put us in a place to learn from you over the next few minutes. God, that you would speak directly to the souls of each and every person that's going to watch this. God, that we would see the cautionary tale of David's life and we would avoid the same kind of trajectory. In Jesus' name, amen. So online, I asked you in the comments, what is a project or hobby you gave up on and why? What is a project or a hobby that you gave up on and why. In our family, recently, we were doing, and by we, I mean Alyssa, was doing a whole bunch of yard work, which is great. If our HOA is watching, we're working on it. And there was one last part of it where we had to replace these bushes, and we'd gotten them, and they were sitting where they needed to be in the front yard. And then when the wind came yesterday, we actually moved them a week after we got them into our garage. So they're essentially indoor plants right now. Like, we got a good start, but we got to finish. And who knows, maybe we'll get it done today. Some of you had some good comments as well. Frank said it was chemistry. It was a chemistry set. And I saw this several minutes ago, Frank. I was trying to read what you said. Ran out of phenolphthalein solution. I would stop with that too, absolutely. Annie on Church Online said flipping old furniture, buy old, paint and sell. And then Tyler on YouTube said crocheting. I just didn't like it anymore. That sounds fair. Oh, look at that. Jason actually gave me the pronunciation for that word. I just didn't see it. So obviously we can all look at kind of things that we started, that we had a good crack at, that maybe you did for a while, and somewhere along the way, probably for really good reasons, we stopped doing it. And well, we can look at different hobbies or different projects and see what we did and why we did it. Where it becomes really problematic is when that happens in our life, in our inner world, in our growth. As a matter of fact, when we look at David's life, if you've been with us over the last few weeks on the weekend or checking out stuff with Daily Time with God during the week on Facebook or YouTube, what we've been focusing on is this unbelievable path and trajectory where David went from the runt of the litter, this little shepherd boy, to being anointed king, to, because of his confidence in God, taking out Goliath, to being on the run from the current king Saul, who's viewed him as a threat, and then eventually, finally, he becomes king. And Israel experiences some incredible success because of David's leadership. And as a matter of fact, he does it in a way that he rejects something that Israel wanted, that Saul modeled, and I think we need to be really careful about. Here's what I'll call it. I've heard it described this way. He rejects king culture. See, for Israel, they wanted a king like other nations had, but God wanted to be their king. And so instead of continuing to lean in and press on that, God was like, you got to learn the lesson on your own. And so he gave them Saul to be a king like other nations had. But king culture, as we define it in humanity, is this idea that somebody's better than other people. Somebody gets to do it their own way. And king culture, we're going to watch with David, even though he got a great start in his leadership, rejecting all the things that he could get away with in king culture. By the time we reach where we are here in this story today, he has embraced king culture. Because here's the thing, David's apathy is what eventually brought about king culture in his life. And apathy for all of us either has us personally embrace king culture or allow it around us. And we're going to talk about how dangerous that is. But ultimately, this is what I hope you learn today, that when growth stops, apathy starts. You know, whether it's, hey, we just have potted plants in our garage now, or you just don't crochet anymore, or that chemistry set gets thrown away, we have to just decide, hey, you know what, I tried, this is just where it's gonna be. I made some progress, this is as far as that progress is going to go. And so for you to take a step back and go, okay, well, I'm unwilling for this to be the furthest I progress personally. And so how can you, over the next few minutes, maybe let God in? Maybe let God show you some areas in your life that you need to grow. Now, what we see with David, first and foremost, is this idea that I think lots of us, when we either embrace or allow king culture around us, is that exceptions break the rules. Exceptions break the rules. See, it's so important and easy for us to find ourselves wooed into this idea that I'm an exception to the rule. But no. Exceptions break the rule. People who think they are exceptions, they start to color outside the lines. They start to do it their own way. And we've said this over and over again, that when God says do, he means he designed you that way. And when God says don't, he means don't hurt yourself. And so as we look at this idea that we get to be different, we get to be the exclusionary person in this, we get to do it our own way, that is going to cause damage and problems for you and for other people. Here's the question I want you to answer in the chat over the next few minutes. What rules did you break as a kid? What rules did you break as a kid? For me, when I was young, we had bedtime or whatever, and pretty young, I got a stereo in my room that had a remote. And after my bedtime, I would listen to the radio in my room, and the remote was underneath my pillow. And so I could hear when people were walking up and down the hall, and I would turn off my stereo with the remote if I heard somebody coming. That was just this little weird thing that I did as a kid. So what was it for you as you think back to how in this situation, in this season, maybe as a kid, you broke some rules? We're going to pick up in David's life. He's had unbelievable military success at this point. But in 2 Samuel 11, we see a pivot in the life of David. It says, in the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. See, the thing that's being called out here is really important. It's very unique because for David, when we think back to his life, he has been a warrior since way before he was a king. It's kind of how he got put on the map, right? Even if you're not a church person, even if you're not a person of faith, David and Goliath, it's like just a thing you've heard about. And so not just then, but even after then, when he was a threat to Saul, Saul would send him into these military conflicts because he thought the enemy force was so overwhelming that it would get David killed and eliminate the threat. But David was constantly successful. Then David becomes king, and Israel experiences unprecedented success. And now, somewhere along the way, that's changed. Now we reach this moment in the year for Israel where the rains have stopped, the ground has started to dry up and harden, and the chariots and the troops could go address all these tensions that have been building for months and battle in the springtime. And it would have been normal for any king, but especially David, to go out with his soldiers, but he doesn't. And so the problem, right, is that oftentimes for you and me, when we stop in the battles of our life, when we disengage, when we pull back and we go from battling to boredom, we get in trouble. David ends up bored, wandering around the roof of his house when he spots a woman bathing on the top of her house. Now, the way that it worked in this community is that in the city of David in Jerusalem, it's hilly terrain. And for David, the king, his house would have been at the very top. And as he looks down, he sees other roofs, and he sees this woman, Bathsheba, bathing on her roof. And the text tells us that he looked, and then that he gazed, and then that he asked. And he just let himself keep going downhill. It goes on and it says, and David sent and inquired about the woman. And one said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Right, there is this servant who either knew this information or found this information for him. And what he says is basically like, I think this woman's married. Now for David, he had already begun to embrace king culture because God has said from the very earliest pages that the way he designed marriage to work was between one man and one woman for a lifetime with God in the middle of it. And we watch people over and over and over again in the Hebrew scriptures mess this up, including Saul and now David. David has a harem of women who are concubines. He has many wives. And now not only is he not satisfied with the ones that he has, he wants another man's wife. But when he hears this, right, it should have been enough. This should have been enough that when he heard somebody else say, oh, you know what? Actually, yep, this is somebody's daughter. This is somebody's wife. Uriah the Hittite, by the way, he is battling where you should be right now. That's the implication of it. That should have been enough. And somewhere along the way, you wonder if the servant who's talking about this is thinking to himself, like, David, I hope you hear me, man. And when David didn't, and when David continued to lean in, I'm sure that servant thought, I want to do something different. I want to speak to this issue. I want to tell him that this isn't okay, but he's the king and I'm just a servant to the king. What difference can I make? And so all of a sudden, David instructs this woman to be brought to him, and he sleeps with her. And Bathsheba would have had no choice. For the king to call you in, a middle-aged David, he sleeps with her whether it's one time or over the course of several times, and she ends up pregnant. And all of a sudden, this indiscretion from David, this awful act that he had done, it wasn't just king culture for him. It was enabled by the servant that came back with information. It was enabled by the servants who went to get Bathsheba. And I'm sure Bathsheba wished that one of them or some of them or all of them would have stood up to David, but they didn't. That's what king culture does. King culture says, you know what? I didn't do something to this woman, but that wasn't enough for Bathsheba. And so I asked you the question a few minutes ago, what rules did you break as a kid, right? Because we can look at those and kind of realize, look, we all Well, break some rules from time to time. Those feel safe enough and distant enough, right? Doug on a Church Online said that he stole a magazine from a Circle K. They made me sweep the parking lot for a week. Wow. David on Facebook said, hiding a small black and white TV under my blanket after bedtime so I could watch Monday Night Football. That is amazing, actually. Kelsey on YouTube said, I used to stay up way past bedtime. I still do this one. Oops, yeah, sometimes we don't learn those lessons, do we? You know, it's interesting when we think about those experiences in our life, because if we're not careful, we swap out stagnation in our external life for stagnation and apathy in our internal life. And when growth stops, apathy starts. And maybe for you, it's been a while. Maybe for you, it's been a while since you've had to say, you know what, God, I'm gonna lean in, I'm gonna trust you, I'm gonna let you work on some things inside of me. Instead of trying to edit you, I'm gonna let you edit me. Because here's the problem. David thinks, oh no, this bad thing has happened, and he's gonna try to cover it up. But the thing we're about to learn is that cover-ups get uncovered. Cover-ups get uncovered. You might think that you have this under control. You might think that you have this managed, but whatever it is you're thinking about right now, your view about other people, your thoughts about people in authority, your perspective about the challenges that are in front of you, the temptations that you're facing, maybe you think you can cover it up, but you can't. Cover-ups get uncovered. And at this point in the story, David still has choices. He can come clean. And to be honest, it wouldn't be the first mistake that he's made, and there wouldn't be that huge of consequences for the king. If he had just said, hey guys, I'm gonna tell you what I did, I can't believe it, it's so bad, I'm so sorry, here's what I've done, here's the mess that I've created, it would have basically been a PR problem for David. But he doesn't do that. He goes to plan B largely to keep his reputation intact. And so what he does is he has Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, brought back from the battlefield. And after getting a quick update, he sends Uriah back home and says, all right, go be with your wife tonight. And his hope is that night they sleep together, and that all of a sudden the timing of this birth matches that, and he's good, we're all covered up, everything's fine. But the thing that happened was Uriah had more integrity than David. And so Uriah doesn't go home. Uriah sleeps outside of David's house. And so the next day, David hears word of this, and he's like, you gotta be kidding me. And Uriah said this to David. He said, the ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths. And my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. See, Uriah is actually giving respect and honor to his troops, to his forces, and to David to say it's not right for me to do this, to which I'm sure David felt like, well, I mean, I'm not even out there with you guys at all. Uriah has more integrity in this moment than David does, and he rejects king culture. And part of it was his loyalty to his men. Part of it was David's leadership. But David was not satisfied there. He tries another night, actually this time gives him a meal, gets him drunk, and tries to kind of just send him home. Uriah falls asleep on the couch in David's house and doesn't go back home. And so then David's ultimate plan, this is what happens when we try to cover it up. This is what happens when king culture goes unchecked, right? Things go from bad to worse to fatal. It says, in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, that he may be struck down and die. I cannot even possibly imagine what this must have felt like. David's plan had not worked up to this point, but what he says basically to himself is, I have to find a way to deal with this. And so the way that he deals with this, the way that he rationalizes this, he's different, he's special, he's entitled to cover this up, is he's going to get Uriah killed. And so he hands Uriah himself his own death sentence, and he brings it back to the battlefield and hands it to his commanding officer. And as Joab is reading, and I can't imagine what Joab must have thought, right? He's reading the letter, and Uriah, who hasn't read it at this point, is like, hey, we okay, you know, whatever. And he's like, oh, yeah, we're good. You go out front. And it took another person and another person and another person and another person for the king culture of David, as he goes off track, as he continues down this path of destruction, pain, and damage, not just for himself, but for others. It takes other people who thought, you know what, I'm not killing him, the Ammonites are. But if Joab had done something different, somebody had stood up, Uriah might have survived, but he doesn't. The plan works. He steps in and he gets killed. Text goes on to say, when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she lamented over her husband. And when the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife. Let me add a little commentary reference to that. She became another wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. See, here's the thing. David at this point thinks, I got away with it. All right, now, Bathsheba is my wife. Nobody's telling me this is wrong because everybody's decided they don't tell me the truth anymore because I've created a climate in king culture where I get to do it my way, and nobody tells me the truth because they know that they'll get in trouble for it. Because here's what we learn in this experience in David's life, that authority without accountability creates king culture. That when we have authority and we do not embrace accountability, either in our life or the authorities around us, it creates king culture. And David had now fully embraced king culture. Plan A didn't work, plan B didn't work, and now he's in this spot where it feels like the final plan worked. But the thing is, what he doesn't realize is that it didn't. See, some of you have temptation or sin in your life. You have things in your life that you've let little compromises like David build over time, and you're in a season where you feel like you've gotten away with it. You're in a season where you feel like it's just not that big a deal anymore, but no matter the sin or the temptation, you don't have it under control. You aren't just accountable for what you do. You're accountable for how you engage in what others do around you. What you permit, you promote. God always offers grace to each and every one of us and through us to other people, but failure becomes fatal when it's final. When we don't turn back to God. And some of you, today is the day that God is going to challenge you in some areas of your life to turn back to God, to be able to step back in. Because when growth stops, apathy starts. There are just times in your life where you have decided, I don't really have to grow anymore. It's not a big deal. But when your growth stops, apathy starts. You just decide, I don't have to grow anymore. I don't have to step in anymore. The time, though, for you and me, the time for David and the time for our world, time is up. Time is up. It might feel like you got lots of time to still figure this out, but what we're watching all around our world is that specifically some injustices related to king culture. Time is up. It's time for us to do something different, to approach it differently. But maybe you didn't see this coming. Maybe for you, this has all caught you off guard. Here's my question I'd love for you to answer in the chat over the next few minutes. What is the most stressful deadline you've ever had? What is the most stressful deadline you've ever had? For me, when I finished grad school and entered ministry up in Seattle a number of years ago, I actually still had one more semester of grad school to finish once I moved and started. And I remember one of the classes I was working on was Hebrew exegesis. And if that sounds difficult and nerdy, it was both of those things. And I remember over the course of that entire semester thinking, I really need to get to that. I really need to get to that new place, new community, new job. I really need to get to that. Fast forward, I had one final long weekend to do the entire semester's worth of work, essentially, and translate a book in the Hebrew scriptures, what we call the Old Testament, the entirety of it in a weekend. I had some long nights and a lot of coffee. What is the craziest deadline you've ever faced? For David, he thought that he had lots of time. He probably thought he had lots of time to wait and to deal with this and to let God work in him. And maybe one day he was going to have to face this with God, but he didn't think anybody really thought about it. Meanwhile, in a cultural moment like this, well, nobody was talking to him about it because of king culture. They were all talking to one another about it. And so Nathan, who is God's prophet and an advisor to David, breaks the silence of king culture. And that's what somebody always has to do. Somebody has to raise their hand and say, this isn't okay. Somebody has to decide, we're not going to do it this way anymore. And so he goes up to David and he describes a story. He describes a story about how a rich man who was awaiting a guest who had tons of sheep didn't use one of his own sheep. No, he found a poor man that had one little sheep, one baby lamb. And he takes that baby lamb from the poor man and he uses it to feed his guest. Now, what David doesn't know that Nathan knows is that Nathan is describing the situation with Bathsheba. But to David, and lots of us, right? When we're in this spot and we have a blind spot, even though we can't see it ourselves, even though we have a difficult time examining or diagnosing ourselves, it's very easy for us to see the problem in others. And that's what we see happen here with David. It says, then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. And he said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. And he shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing and because he had no pity. Nathan said to David, you are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. And God goes on to talk to David through Nathan about all the ways that he'd shown up, about the experience as a young man, about how God had provided for him and how he had protected him from Saul and how he'd given him this incredible blessing as king and promised him even more blessings in the future. And then he goes on and says, hey, here's the thing though, all of it's about to get reversed. All the blessing that you have and the blessing that was promised is about to get reversed. It goes on to say, thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor. And he shall lie with your wives in the sight of this sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun. I mean, all of a sudden, time is up for David. All of a sudden, king culture has blown up in his face. All of a sudden, everything he thought he would get away with, he's no longer going to get away with. And so the thing that changes for David is that he actually repents. It's not enough for him to just say, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. But you know, we all do that. We go, but what about? No. He says, I was wrong. I can't believe I did this to you, to other people. And he commits to returning back to God and to living differently. And because of that, God offers him grace, but it doesn't mean that all of the judgment is gone. Because here's the problem with the sin in our life, right? We've said this over and over and over again, that just because God forgives you doesn't mean that you are free of the consequences of your decisions. And that's what David is going to experience for the rest of his leadership. Really, this is the hinge on which David's leadership as king lives. And what we see for decades after this is that the rest of the way he is king, especially in the life of his grown kids, goes more and more and more sideways. Because when you embrace king culture, the longer you embrace it, the more challenging the consequences. But those deadlines, right? When we don't see them coming, it can be really, really difficult. I asked you the question in the chat, what is the most stressful deadline you've ever had? Some of you answered that question. I don't know what this means. Single parent life, that feels like there's probably lots of deadlines in that. Mary said on Facebook, renewing my teaching certificate after waiting until most of my classes I needed were full. That sounds very stressful. Church Online, Mark said, putting the crib together before baby showed up. I have lived that life as well. Yeah, absolutely. Those deadlines come quick, and especially with a baby, you're like, is it gonna be a month from now or tomorrow? You know, it can change really, really fast. But I think that what we have to realize is that there is a deadline to our apathy. And in places where we have let growth go for a while, where it just hasn't been a priority, maybe it's been easy for us to ignore it around us. Where that happens, it grows apathy. And right now, the apathy towards king culture in our world, the timeline is up. And the thing that we have embraced ourselves or allowed around us, we are hearing from our friends, from our black and brown brothers and sisters, that they have been living through this for a long time, and they have been living through it oftentimes with our silence. See, a lot of times what we see around us is we see people asking the same questions that so many of these different people around David would have asked. What can I do? What difference could I make? He's the king. I just need to back off. I just need to let it work itself out. I'm not doing that to Bathsheba. I'm not doing that to Uriah. But there were so many people that if they didn't do that thing that they did, if they didn't allow that thing that they did, it could have been different. And I actually think it's maybe the wrong question, I think that in some ways, the question of what difference could I make, he's the king and I'm not, I think that's sometimes the wrong question. The question that we should be asking isn't what difference could I make, it's what difference could we make? Because when we gather together, when we have a voice that speaks, we can make a difference together. But I think that there's a really important thing we need to take a step back in this moment and realize. When we think about George Floyd and the killing that we were able to see because it was recorded, it wasn't just the police officer that was on his neck that was charged. It was the police officers around him. It was the police officers that didn't do it but didn't do anything to stop it. And I know that it's easy, right? This is not a right or a left issue. This is so easy for us to find a reason to say, oh, I'm not going to listen to him about this, or there's so much more than you know, Phil. And certainly there is. But this is not just something that happens in some other place at some other time. And I think we have to understand that. I think we have to realize that this is still something so very close and so very real. And I love that I've been able to have unbelievable conversations with friends this week. Friends of mine that are black and brown brothers and sisters in Jesus, created in the image of God with infinite dignity, value, and worth. Conversations with law enforcement here in our community. Friends of mine that are on Denver PD. One of them I'm texting with, who saw the video, who hates racism, who wants to root out racist cops, and feels completely pinned in, serving actually to help prevent rioting in the streets, feeling like he's in a no-win situation. But this is so much closer than we think it is. Just 3 days ago, I was in a restaurant with some friends. There were 9 of us. One guy who's Mexican, 3 black friends, and the rest of us were white. And we were sitting on a patio of a local restaurant here in our community, just a mile away from here. And as we're sitting there hanging out, there is a glass window to the inside of the restaurant, and there's a table with 2 different couples at it. And over the course of the night, the couples one guy in particular starts making faces and doing things towards us on the patio. And the thing that really kind of set it off, he said to his waitress, he said, look at those poor white people with those monkeys. And that's the only part of the conversation that's really even appropriate for me to share with you. That wasn't 3 centuries ago, it wasn't 3 decades ago, it wasn't 3 years ago, it was 3 days ago. And I watched my friends around the table, all of us react like, what just happened? How is this still happening? My friend Mark is sitting right next to me, he's a black man, and it was obvious that he's really affected by it. And I just said, man, are you okay? We're safe, everything's good. And he just kind of shrugged it off and he was like, I'm not worried about me. I just hate that this is what I'm raising my daughters in. I'm worried about them. It was like he'd kind of already given up, like, oh, this is just my reality. But how can we change this for the next generation? And I looked across the table at my friend who's Mexican, Isai, and I said, how often does this happen? How many times has this happened to you? And he just said, countless. And I just think if that doesn't affect us, that's happening all day, every day. That even if it hasn't been your experience, it's been someone else's experience. And the way we learn, the way that we experience empathy is not to just say, what have I done or not done? Let's not settle for being not racist. In moments like this, when we see the king culture show up around us, we're just down the street. One human looked at another human knowing nothing about them and deciding that the color of their skin meant that they could treat them as less than human. Not racist is not enough. Anti-racist. What are you and I doing to push back against king culture in our life? I was thinking about this even since we had our service last night, and I want to just encourage you to do 3 things. One, if you are somebody that this has not been your experience, especially if you are white in our community, learn. Go watch some documentaries, go read some books. If you're like, I don't want to read those ones, I want to read some other ones. Great, do some research and learn some stuff. But learn some stuff that's different than your preconceived notions. Learn. Second, listen. Listen to black and brown friends in your life. And if you're like, oh, I've got tons of friends, go to your text message feed and just look at the last 10 or 15 text messages. How many of them are to people of color in your life? It's time for you to sit down and just listen. Just be a friend. Just be in relationship. It's not their job to educate you. So they may do that over time, but commit yourself to learn, and with them, just listen. And then third, lean in. Lean into conversations. Lean into difficult moments. When you have an experience with friends like I had on Thursday night, don't just brush it off. Don't just try to forget that it happened. Lean in. And when you hear somebody maybe in your circle of friends that says something that, they aren't trying to be really racist, they're not trying to be over the top, and I'm not asking you to be PC police, but rather than just laughing it off because you can get away with doing that, lean in. Why did you say that? What makes you think that's okay? That's my friend. Listen, learn, and lean in. Here's my last question for you. Where does your relationship with God need fresh growth right now? Obviously, as we talk about king culture and we talk about the impact of it, right now it feels a little different, right? And maybe for you, it is something around perspective. For my black and brown friends, people in our community, people that are watching online, I just want to say thank you so much for the way that you have been patient for so long on this issue. And I'm sorry that I have been silent on this issue. And so how do we make sure that that changes? What is the growth that needs to happen in me in this time? And maybe for you, it's got nothing to do with race today. Maybe the thing that God's challenging you to grow in is your own personal blind spots. Maybe there are some relationships or some pursuits or some temptations that you have just let go in your life for too long. And the apathy of being okay with it has really ultimately hurt you. We're going to transition here in just a second and take communion together. So if you have those supplies, go grab them. What Jesus did in his earthly ministry is he rejected king culture. He wanted to show what this new and better kingdom was going to be about. He wanted to show that his kingship rejected all of these attitudes of entitlement. And Paul, who had grown up Jewish, who was among the Jewish elite, writing to the church at Philippi, he describes it this way. He says, "Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God as something to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking on the form of a servant. Being born in the likeness of man, he became, found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient even to the point of death, even death on a cross." What does it look like for you and me to be humbled? It means that for all of us, we don't know everything. It means for all of us, rather than just saying, yeah, but what about? Let's not make this a political thing. I'm not asking you to change political affiliations. I'm not telling you who to vote for. This is way simpler than that. I'm asking you to acknowledge that Jesus came to die for each and every person of every color, because every person, regardless of their race, is created in the image of God with infinite dignity, value, and worth. Jesus would ultimately sacrifice himself to communicate that to us. And on the final night that he was with his friends, the night that he would be betrayed, he took the Passover meal that they had experienced one way their whole life. And he took the bread at dinner and he broke it. And he gave it to his friends and he said, "This is my body, which is broken for you. Whenever you eat it, never forget." After dinner, Jesus took the cup and he said, "This cup, it represents my blood, and in my blood, the new covenant, an agreement between God and mankind, that with no spilt blood, there is no forgiveness of sin, and his blood spilled and poured out for each and every one of us to know the truth, that he loves us, that he died for us, and that a relationship is still possible. Never forget." I know that for many of us, this is a very challenging conversation because it's easy to settle for non-something. But being against the things that Jesus is against, speaking against them, acting against them, doing something different, it can be difficult, it can be challenging. But I hope in this season, God will wake us up to listen to our brothers and sisters, that together we can grow closer to God in this unique season. Would you pray with me? God, thank you. Thank you for the learning that you give us, the cautionary tale of David's life, that when we settle like David did for a little bit of entitlement after a little bit of entitlement in king culture, it gets really, really bad. Or like the people around David did, when we use it as an excuse that we're not perpetrating negative acts, but we are allowing them around us. God, we have a call that's higher than that too. Would you challenge us to that call? God, would you change our hearts to see people as you have made them? Thank you for the model that you have given us in your Son. It's in his name that we pray. Amen.
In time searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Though there's nothing better than you, there's nothing better than you, there's nothing that's better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, then you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's no pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender, you are breaking new ground. So I yield to you into your careful hand. When I trust you, I don't need to understand. So make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender, you are breaking new ground. You are breaking a new ground. So make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me
So make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. Oh God, I came here with nothing, but all that you've given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh Jesus, bring new wine out of me. God, I thank you for this moment that we can lift praise up to you and glorify your name. God, we pray for new life. We pray for restoration. God, be with us now. You are such a good God. There is nothing better than you. And we lift up your name today. We love you so much. Amen.
What a great reminder today to slow down and to put down king culture and to listen to the growth that God has for us, the desire that God has for us. In fact, Phil asked the question at the end, where does your relationship with God need fresh growth? And Katie on Facebook said, listen, read, and lean into the uncomfortableness of it all. I pray that God continues to break us so we can grow in faith in him. And that's the same prayer all of us can pray every single day. How can we lean into what God has for us, even when it makes us uncomfortable? One of the things here at Eastern Hills that we believe is we believe growth happens at every age and stage, from littles all the way through high school, through adulthood. And one of the things we want to do is partner with you to help that happen in your own homes. And we know this season has been weird, especially for our kiddos, as they've lost camps or they've lost retreats. And we want you to know we have things for them. In fact, for littles through preteen, we have Bible sports camp that you can do at home with them. You can learn and grow alongside each other while playing sports, watching goofy videos, and having a good time. For middle school and for high school, we have virtual online camps happening this summer so that we can still gather, still grow, and still challenge one another. If you want information on any of that, you can go to ehills.org/family, and it's a great chance for kids of all ages to continue that same growth that we desire for ourselves. So check that out. And thank you. A lot of this happens because of your generosity, not just the summer programs, but the week in, week out ministry happens because of how you give and how you participate here. If you'd like to do so, you can give at ehills.org/give and be a participant in what God's doing here in Aurora and around the world. It's an incredible chance to continue to help people see that Jesus makes life better and to continue to grow every single week. We also want to invite you next week as we do a message called We're Not Animals. And it's really looking at this picture of the political sphere that we live in right now between the elephant and the donkey, and how do we put those images down in order to focus on God, on his heart, on his desire. And just like Katie said, learn, listen, and lean in. And it's going to be a difficult conversation, and it's going to stretch us, and there's going to be moments we're frustrated and moments that we're excited. But what a great chance to live this out, to slow down, and to learn what God wants for us, not what king culture tells us we need. So invite your friends, invite your family, and be ready to be stretched. If you're new with us, or if you want information on how to get connected on the week in, week out ministry, we're going to show a video after this called Connection Point, and it's a great chance for you to learn a little bit more about how you can find community here, even in this digital season, but also a great chance to hear a little bit about what we do at Eastern Hills. Otherwise, we are so excited to see you guys back next week. Have a great Sunday.
Hey, welcome to Connection Point. We're so glad you joined us this weekend and that you stuck around to hopefully find a next step into community at Eastern Hills. My name's Dustin, and I'm the Connections Pastor.
My name's Liz. I'm the community pastor here at Eastern Hills, and we're so excited that you are here with us today to learn more about Eastern Hills, what we're about, and ways that you can take a next step. One of the ways that we really want you to take a next step this season is by joining a group, especially now. So you can head to ehills.org/community to learn more about our short-term online groups where you can take your next step today.
Maybe you're not quite ready to jump into a group yet, and that's totally fine. We're just glad you're here. If you're in the chat, just leave a comment, leave an emoji, let us know that you are here. And actually, Liz and I are both going to be live in the chat answering any questions you have about Eastern Hills or how to get connected. So Liz, for somebody watching today that maybe this is the first time they've been a part of a service, what is Eastern Hills all about?
Yeah, so our mission as a church is to invite everyone to experience that Jesus makes life better. We really believe that following Jesus will make your life better and will make you better at life.
Now, you might be thinking what Liz just said, or maybe something you heard in the service today, sounds a little bit too good to be true. You've been around Christians before, or you've been around church before, and you're like, man, if that's what you mean by better at life, I'm not sure I really want that. Or maybe you're thinking, if I follow Jesus, is he really just going to solve all of my problems?
So no, that's not how it goes. We believe, though, that following Jesus doesn't make life easier. It doesn't make your problems go away, but it does make life better. And by following him, we can find hope and joy, and we can live out the people that we were created to be. And so, as we said before, we say that we are inviting you to experience that Jesus makes life better. And we do that in 3 ways here at Eastern Hills. We do that by reaching out, growing deep, and partnering with families. So Dustin, do you want to share a little bit more about how we reach out?
Yeah, so Reach Out is actually the team that I have been on since I started working here. And what we mean by Reach Out is really taking care of our community in any way that we can. We want to be a church that's known for what we're for. Lots of churches are known for what they're against, and we want to be for Aurora. That's our city, that's where we live, and so we do whatever we can to take care of our community, not just the people in our church, but the people in our city. And one of the ways that we do that is through a ministry called Marketplace. It's a weekly food bank that serves our community, people in need. And then we also just opened up a care portal, which helps connect individuals and groups to needs that they can fill in the moment. And then we also have groups like Financial Peace University and Coping with Covid that help people through whatever season of life they're in. So that's Reach Out. Liz, tell us about Grow Deep.
Yeah, so growing deep, you can make a decision to follow Jesus, but that's not where it stops. That's the starting point for you, where you can begin to grow deeper in your walk with Jesus. And one of the ways that we hope for you to do that is by joining a community group or being a part of community. And we really believe that by being a part of community, that you are surrounded by people who will hold you accountable, who will push you to grow, who will walk alongside you in studying the Bible, and who will pray with you when you need it the most. And so you can learn more about our digital community by heading to ehills.org/community. All of our community groups are meeting online right now, and it's a great way to stay connected even when we can't be together in person.
And then the final one is partnering with families. We believe that whatever stage your family is in, we want to do our best to serve you and your children. So our family ministry team has worked super hard to create content and groups for your kids, whatever age they may be in. And if you want to find out more about those groups and specific programming and content that we have available for your kids, you can go to ehills.org/content and find all of that right there. So Liz, what would you say the best place for someone who's new and looking to connect to take a next step would be?
Yeah, so right now the best place for you to connect is by joining a short-term online group, and we have a lot of groups for you to choose from right now. We've got a Parent Connection Hour that connects parents with kids ages little kids to college age, and what it's like to be a parent in this season where you're becoming a teacher and balancing that with working from home, and maybe there's not a lot of activities that you can normally do together. That's a great group to be a part of. We also have our women's groups that are happening throughout the week, whether it's a book club or a group where you can come together and talk about how you're feeling right now, how you see God working, what you see God doing in your own life. We also have a men's group called The Harbor that meets on Friday mornings at 7 a.m. We have like 40 to 50 guys. That's awesome that are joining us for the harbor. And so those are some ways that you can connect throughout the week. And if joining a Zoom community group sounds weird to you or intimidating, or like connecting through a screen doesn't maybe feel like the best place or the best fit for you right now, you can also check out some of our offerings on Facebook. We've got a daily time with God that is led by our lead pastor, Phil, and our Grow Deep pastor, Lisa, and they are really walking through how to study the Bible. It's a great place to get connected there. Also, on Monday nights, we have our men's Home Field Advantage show, which is happening live on our men's Facebook page, and they're talking about sports, which is something I think a lot of people are missing right now.
Hey, and then if you are new to faith, there's just one last group I want to mention, and that's Starting Point. It's an ongoing group. We've done it differently in the past, but right now it's really just a casual conversation about what it means to follow Jesus. So if you are new to faith and you have questions about what that looks like, we would love for you to join Starting Point. You could find that in the same place as all the other short-term groups. And then if you want to get involved in serving here at Eastern Hills, we would love to have you do that as well. You can join us by bringing a donation for Marketplace. We're always in need of some general products for people who are looking to come and get their basic grocery shopping done. You can find a list of what those are and where and when to drop them off on our website at ehills.org/care. And then you can also join the Care portal. If you say, hey, I would love to serve individuals in our community who need it, you can sign up. You'll receive information about what needs there are, and you can go ahead and grab one and say, I can handle that one, and go and take care of that need yourself. So we would love for you to be a part of serving our community in that way as well. And thank you so much for joining us online this weekend. We are so glad that you came to Connection Point.
Yeah, and we're so hoping that we can see you online next weekend. We hope you have a great week.